Yeah.
Yeah, what should we move to next? We have lots of options. We
uh
should talk about Big Lebowski.
I was gonna say you mentioned Big Lebowski.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
like
think this is the one I'm aching to talk about the most.
yeah, yeah. The
So
one that on paper you're like you might be like, why is this on a neo-noir list? But then when you watch the movie and think of it in that regard, it's like one of the best neo-noir movies and one that like fits the genre so well.
well, it's interesting because I was talking with Anthony yesterday and we brought up Neo-Noir. And I said, yeah, and you got movies like Chinatown and The Long Goodbye and The Big Lebowski. And he stops me. He says, what the fuck are you talking about? I love The Big Lebowski. It's not neo-noir. I said, watch it again because
Yeah.
it is. So first of all, before we even get into the movie, look at the title, The Big Lebowski. The purpose of a title like that is it quite literally mimics what movies tried to do in the past when they were lower budget and they didn't have enough of an audience, which was make it seem way grander than it really is with movies like The Big Sleep and The Big Heat. And you think of these like really crazy big thrillers with those names. And so with The Big Lebowski, it's literally a rip on that.
Yeah, very much on purpose. It's very
done
on purpose. The Coen brothers have said that The Long Goodbye is like the big influence on this movie, and the name is very much like right there.
Yeah, and there's parallels to many other stories too, like Murder My Sweet, The Maltese Falcon, and half of the plot is basically ripped from The Big Sleep, because we got the dude played by Jeff Daniels, one of the best performances of that decade. Jeff Bridges, yeah, and we have a case of what's interesting about him. So it's like the movie it's this like at first it's like this stoner comedy, right? And then he's very much a victim of circumstance. In a lot of these movies, usually the events of the protagonist, it causes this snowball effect, and it's because of their doing. Meanwhile, the dude is just pissed because like his rug got pissed on and they confused him for the wrong Lebowski. And then he goes down this fucking rabbit hole.
It basically flips the entire concept that we were talking about before on its head, where you have the protagonist who thinks he's the hero, but isn't. In this one, it's the protagonist who actively is trying to not be the hero and not be the main character in the story and cannot avoid being the main character in the story.
Yeah. And so even when they get to when he first gets to the Lebowski's house, he sees that he's in the wheelchair and he explains the story and whatever. Like that's all pretty much from The Big Sleep, aside, like even down to the old man in the wheelchair, aside from the relationship of the family. So and with this movie, like there's technically two femme fatales in this movie, because we have Bunny, who is the trophy wife of Lebowski, played by Tara Reid, who where that career though, and then we and by the way, like one of my favorite scenes that is so like not even to me, like it's so overlooked as a non-humor. It's when she says, I'll if you give me $1,000, I'll blow you. And Philip Seymour Hoffman is just standing there and he lets out like the most awkward laugh I've ever seen in a movie. It cracks me up every fucking time.
Yeah, it is so funny too. How good of a neo-noir movie it is. It's also a fantastic comedy.
Yeah, but then we also have Maude, who is the daughter of Lebowski and plays a very non-conventional femme fatale, because most of the time in a noir or a neo-noir, we have the femme fatale who's very they're very misleading. They derail the protagonist in order to self-serve themselves and benefit themselves. But Maude doesn't really have motivation or a reason to really slight the dude like as much as another protagonist. So it's interesting how they kind of play those those two femme fatales. But and then you have the inclusion of Jackie Treehorn, that porno producer, and then that's also ripped from I think it's either The Big Sleep or another Neo-Noir. So basically the Coen brothers were like, we're just gonna basically use 4 movies as the template for this movie. And I love that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
But and then of course we have the whole, it's so funny too, because it's like it almost mimics the whole connection system of partners in these movies, where we have Walter and Donnie, Goodman and Buscemi, and who Goodman in this movie is just like, oh man, he pulls no punches with his performance. It is fucking phenomenal. Like when they go to interrogate that kid and he's holding up the homework. Is this your homework, Larry? And then he goes out to the car and he's like, you see what happens when you fuck a stranger in the ass? And then he is so like balls to the walls insane. And I love it.
It's funny because like I said, like the dude is kind of like rejecting the role of the protagonist, whereas like John Goodman's character thinks he's the protagonist and he's the side character. Yeah, that's what like makes him so funny. Like he thinks he's on this heroic journey and he's not.
Yeah, because there's like the whole plot where they try to do the exchange of money to get back Bunny from the kidnappers, and then Walter takes it into his own hands and switches the cases and decides to keep the money for himself and just throws the dude into even deeper shit, which is so fucking comical to me. Yeah,
he's a great character, such a great character.
And you know what's so funny? Just kind of a side note. I grew up watching Ed, Edd n Eddy, one of my favorite cartoons ever. And in the show, there's an episode where they're near the Kanker sisters' house, and they pretend they're construction workers. And one of the sisters asks for ID, and Double D quickly crayons in this piece of paper, and it says Walter Subcheck on it, which is the name of Goodman's character. Yeah, it's something that like once I grew up and watched Lebowski and knew what that meant, I lost it. But
yeah, that's really funny.
But and you know the reason the movie's so great too is because even though it can be on the nose with its noir elements, it really is also at the same time a movie about nothing. Nothing really gets done. Nothing. Yeah. There's really no conclusion. Anything. It's like they go bowling and then like Donnie dies and there's really no like cohesiveness.
Yeah, there's no plot really to this.
Yeah, there's not really a plot. It's just a series of unfortunate events. Which I think which is a strength of the movie. I think if they tried to do a straightforward narrative, it would have missed the point of what they were trying to do. So but with the Coen brothers, especially the Coen brothers are low key kind of masters of neo-noir.
Yeah, I was going to say like the Big Lebowski is the easiest one to talk about in this context, but pretty much all of their movies fit. Like Fargo is very neo-noir.
Fargo, Blood Simple is like, man, you want to talk about like exaggerated lighting and dark theming and all that. Like that was their first film too.
Yeah.
Like that's the most impressive part.
But I think the Big Lebowski is like the one that I like to relate the most to the genre because of how well it captures like the whole feel of neo-noir and like a very unexpected packaging pretty much of like this kind of like slacker stoner comedy that happens to also be this neo-noir like story. It's just really interesting how they pulled that off. And it's like with how Blade Runner 2049 is super unique. The Big Lebowski is also very unique. There's not many movies like it. Not that I can think of.
No, there really aren't.
There's movies that would like to be it. Like I would argue that Pineapple Express is very much trying to be this type of a movie, but nothing captures it the way that they did with this.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no room in my neo-noir for Seth Rogen's laughter. Yeah, Lebowski definitely is one of those cases where you could really just have hardcore relation to. And I think that the fact that the Coen brothers took massive influence from movies of yesteryear just really makes it more of a personal experience, especially as people who enjoy the genre. And I think it is so fucking well done.
Mm-hmm.
I think like it's just all around just also a very hysterical movie. It's like at the end too, when Walter is trying to throw the ashes to the wind by the sea and they all blow into the dude's face and the dude gets mad for that minute and then that's kind of it. Is also just like a perfect metaphor of, yeah, you die and then that's it. This is how life treats you. They just throw your fucking ashes into the wind and they end up on your friend's face, you know? I think that's like that's a powerful message without them even trying for it to be one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, very also similar to Drive. I feel like Big Lebowski is one of those movies that people who are really into movies go through like a couple of months phase where they're just obsessed with this movie. I definitely had that phase at one point. It's like one of those movies that when you first come across it, and it's typically like when you're getting into movies because it's not obscure, but it's not like a super mainstream movie. It's not on TV very often or anything. So once you seek it out and watch it, you're like so blown away by it that it just like it like ruins other movies for a little bit and you just want to keep rewatching it.
No, it's absolutely true, and it's amassed such a cult following to the point where our friend Sean threw multiple Big Lebowski themed parties where we would get into bathrobes and make White Russians and watch the Big Lebowski, and
it's just such like such a cool it's cool when a movie is able to do that, and it's such an unlikely one, and yet it's like. When you think of cult movies, like it's the one that comes to mind for me, like right out of the gate. Like it is like the cult movie that still has a huge following and still like you see a White Russian, you think of the Big Lebowski and it has such like an impact in that way.
And to be quite frank, the only reason I'd make a White Russian is because I feel like being the dude. Like there's no other occasion where I'm casually like, yo, I can go for a White Russian. Yeah. It's like I got Lebowski on the mind. I'm gonna make a White Russian.
Because White Russians are the most filling drink ever. You're just drinking milk.
Yeah, it's just like semi-curdled cream.
Yeah. But you feel like the dude when you're doing it. So
you do be feeling like the dude. You know when you don't feel like the dude? When you watch the Jesus Rolls.
Please talk about this movie because I have not seen it and I know that you have.
So I think I very briefly touched on it on one episode, but yeah, it's so interesting to me that you could completely miss the mark. But what I think John Turturro was trying to do, who we didn't mention earlier, but plays this character called the Jesus on the Big Lebowski, who's just this bowling rival who doesn't actually, and I think it's kind of like a satire on antagonists in these kinds of movies because he doesn't really have a place in the movie.
He's just this weird eccentric character that shows up in one scene.
Yeah, he just like licks his bowling ball and that's it. And very sexually suggestive. And John Turturro decided, hey, I think the world wants a movie where it's just the Jesus character. And like, don't get me wrong. I actually think the sentiment was nice because we didn't get much of the character in the first movie, but I think that was the point, is that you weren't supposed to know anything about this very minor character. And then when Turturro decided he's going to take the helms and take the reins and do his own twist on it, it's like, yeah, sure, there's moments you'll probably laugh, but unless you're a real big fan of Lebowski and you were looking for your fix in the interconnected universe of it, you're not gonna enjoy this movie. I mean, I'm surprised I even enjoyed it as much as I did, because it's just like, it's so absurd. The whole movie is the Jesus was in prison. The Jesus gets out of prison. The Jesus immediately steals a car. He tries to shake down this guy who owns a store. Then he's on the run with this woman and his best friend, who they have a weird love triangle, but there's not actually love. He just likes to fuck, and he shows his bare ass around his friend all the time. And then they steal another car. Then they invade this cabin. Then they steal another car. So it's just like, it's like this absurdist reality that they were trying to create for the character. And it's like, but the point of the character in the first one is you know that he's suggestive in his nature. You know that he probably isn't a good person. And then that's where they leave it. Like a character like that, if that character wasn't already like a typical 80s high school bully in your movie, I don't need a spin-off of it, right? Like I don't think, like I don't need a prequel story of the assholes in Chopping Mall. Like you know,
it's almost like the Star Wars approach, where like every character in every single scene has like a novel backstory somewhere. Like the Big Lebowski didn't really need that.
No, and so it's like, it's fine. I'm okay with it coexisting, and I think it's cool that they wanted to do something associated with the universe. But yeah, like it really misses the point, and it's not really anything of substance. But like,
yeah,
if you have like an hour and a half, I think it's like an hour and a half, an hour 40. If you have that time and just want to watch something mindless and you like John Turturro, go for it. But like, I wouldn't say go out of your way and watch it right now.
Yeah. On a similar note, I hope that they never make a sequel to this movie. I know that a lot of people who are like diehard fans have wanted it for a long time, and I really don't want them to do that.
I don't either, because although you could argue it might be able to work because the character seems to get wrapped up in stupid shit, it really has no business being a thing, because he had his journey, and whether and there's really, you're not going to be able to do more without it seeming like non-sentimental, so to speak. It's gonna seem disingenuous, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
it's gonna seem like this is the sequel to The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, and the way I feel about a lot of these like late sequels that we get nowadays that are like remake sequels is a lot of these movies are great, and like the themes in them work so well because they had the beginning, middle, and end of that movie. And like anything, as soon as you expand on that, you're automatically going to negate some of the points that were made in the original movie. And like The Big Lebowski is definitely one that I feel that way about. Like the whole, like the chaotic like nature of this movie, and like all the stuff that happens that's seemingly like nonsensical and doesn't have a backstory. As soon as you start explaining that stuff, you're taking away from what like the point was in the original. Like the movie is supposed to be him like moving through this environment where not everything makes sense, and like there's these people that he doesn't know that are like weird, and it just like works to like build the atmosphere of that movie. And explaining those things later, I think just doesn't do justice to the original. It happens so much with all of these like sequels that we get nowadays. I felt that way a lot about the new Candyman, which I also watched recently, where it was just like, why is this being made?
Yeah.
So I hope it doesn't. I don't think there's any plans for them to do a second one, as far as I'm aware. I just know that I've seen people online like talking about wanting another one.
Yeah, I'm very, very okay with them never touching this franchise.
Yeah. Franchise.
Right. It's like The Big Lebowski, and then the Jesus rolls, and then maybe we stop there.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.